The Secret of Pastor Matthew Kaunda. Final chapters. The Network Exposed. Kemi stared at Dr. Kwame Asante's journal, her mind racing. The implications were staggering. If this old man had taught necromantic rituals to dozens of influential people across West Africa, then Pastor Kaunda's case was just the tip of an iceberg. This changes everything, she told Dr. Aduya. We're not dealing with one corrupt pastor, we're looking at an entire network of people in positions of power who have been using these dark practices. She spent the next month carefully cross-referencing the names in the journal with public figures. Some were religious leaders like Pastor Kaunda. Others were politicians, judges, and business moguls. The journal revealed that Dr. Asante had been running what amounted to a supernatural consulting service for the ambitious and unscrupulous. When Kemi contacted Pastor Kaunda about her discovery, he wasn't surprised. "Doctor, Asante told me I wasn't his first student," Pastor Kaunda said during their phone conversation. "He claimed to have been teaching these practices for decades. I was too consumed with my own power to ask questions about others." "Some of these people are still in positions of great influence," Kemi pointed out. "They could be using stolen power to manipulate elections, court decisions, business deals." "Then they need to be exposed," Pastor Kaunda said firmly. "What we did was evil, regardless of how we justified it. If others are still practicing these rituals, the truth needs to come out." The investigation expands. Armed with Dr. Asante's journal, Kemi began the most ambitious investigation of her career. She reached out to journalists in other African countries, sharing information about the names and locations mentioned in the journal. The response was immediate and concerning. Reporters from Ghana, Cameroon, and South Africa confirmed suspicious patterns among the people named in the journal. Politicians who had experienced sudden rises to power, judges who made inexplicably favorable rulings for certain parties, and religious leaders whose ministries had grown explosively over short periods. One name in particular caught international attention: Justice Samuel Okwu, the Chief Justice of a neighboring country's Supreme Court. According to the journal, he had been one of Dr. Asante's most consistent clients for over 15 years. When this information was published, it triggered a constitutional crisis. Justice Okwu had made several crucial rulings that had shaped his country's recent history, including decisions about disputed elections and major corruption cases. The possibility that these rulings had been influenced by supernatural manipulation sent shockwaves through the region. The reckoning spreads. As more journalists picked up the story, a pattern emerged across West Africa. Several high-profile figures mentioned in Dr. Asante's journal began experiencing dramatic reversals of fortune, similar to what had happened to Pastor Kaunda. A wealthy businessman in Ghana, who according to the journal had been using necromantic rituals to gain advantages in government contracts, was suddenly investigated for tax evasion and corruption. His business empire collapsed within months. A prominent politician in Cameroon, listed as one of Dr. Asante's students, lost a crucial election despite having been heavily favored to win. His supporters were baffled by his sudden loss of charisma and political instincts. Most dramatically, Justice Samuel Okwu was found in his chambers one morning, completely blind and unable to remember key details about his most important cases. Medical examinations could find no physical cause for his condition. Pastor Kaunda watched these developments with a mixture of vindication and sadness. "I recognize what's happening to them," he told Kemi during one of their regular conversations. "The power we stole was never really ours. When the source is cut off, everything built on that foundation crumbles." The return to simplicity. 3 years after his downfall, Pastor Matthew Kaunda had settled into a life that would have been unrecognizable to his former self. He lived in a small apartment in his home village of Ogbomoso, supporting himself by teaching at the local primary school and helping families with funeral arrangements through his organization with Ibrahim. His former cathedral in Lagos had been converted into a community center. The expensive cars, private jets, and luxurious lifestyle were long gone. But for the first time in decades, Pastor Kaunda experienced genuine contentment. On a warm Thursday evening, the same day of the week when he used to perform his dark rituals, Pastor Kaunda sat on his small porch reading his Bible. A young man approached, someone he didn't recognize. "Are you Pastor Matthew Kaunda?" the young man asked nervously. "I used to be called Pastor," Kaunda replied. "Now I'm just Matthew. How can I help you? I've been following your story in the newspapers. I need to tell you something. The young man, who introduced himself as David, explained that he was a theology student who had been considering dropping out of seminary. He had been struggling with doubts about faith, especially after hearing about all the corruption in religious leadership. But when I read about your transformation, David said, it gave me hope. If someone who fell as far as you did can find genuine redemption, then maybe faith is real after all. Matthew smiled, feeling a warmth in his heart that was completely different from the intoxicating power he had once craved. Faith is real, he said, but it's not about miracles or supernatural displays. It's about love, service, and integrity. Those are enough miracles. The final revelation. 5 years after the original exposé, Kemi Johnson received a letter that would bring the story full circle. It came from an unexpected source, Mama Grace's granddaughter, a young woman named Faith Adebayo. Dear Ms. Johnson, the letter read, I've been following your reports about Pastor Kaunda and my grandmother's role in his transformation. There's something I think you should know about my grandmother that might help people understand what really happened that night in the cemetery. Faith explained that Mama Grace had not just been a devout Christian, she had been what people in their village called a prayer warrior. For over 60 years, she had made it her personal mission to pray for people involved in occult practices, asking God to free them from spiritual bondage. Every night before she died, Faith wrote, Grandmother would pray specifically for the man who disturbs the dead. She didn't know Pastor Kaunda's name, but somehow she knew about him. She said God had shown her in a vision that there was a powerful man who was using the dead for evil purposes, and she prayed for his salvation every single day for months before she died. The letter included a photograph of one of Mama Grace's prayer journals, where she had written, Lord, save the man who steals from the dead. Show him your mercy, give him a chance to repent and turn from his wicked ways. When Kemi shared this information with Matthew, he broke down in tears. She was praying for me, he whispered. Even while I was violating the rest of the dead, this holy woman was interceding for my soul. No wonder her spirit had such power that night. 10 years later, after the events that brought down Pastor Matthew Kaunda's empire, West Africa had settled into a new normal. The network of corruption exposed by Dr. Asante's journal had largely been dismantled. Several countries had reformed their judicial systems, and there was greater scrutiny of religious leaders who claimed supernatural powers. Kemi Johnson had won international recognition for her investigative work and now directed a non-profit organization dedicated to exposing corruption in religious and political institutions across Africa. Ibrahim, the former cemetery guard, had become a respected elder in his community, known for his honesty and his work helping poor families honor their deceased loved ones. And Matthew Kaunda continued his quiet life of service in Ogbomoso. He never again claimed to perform miracles, but his genuine transformation had inspired many people to seek authentic faith rather than supernatural spectacle. On the 10th anniversary of that fateful Thursday night in St. Mary's Cemetery, Matthew made his weekly visit to Mama Grace's grave. It had become a tradition for him, not to perform any ritual, but simply to say thank you to the woman whose prayers had saved his soul. As he knelt beside her headstone, placing fresh flowers he had bought with his teacher's salary, Matthew reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. Thank you, Mama Grace, he said quietly. You showed me that real power comes from love, not from taking what isn't ours. You taught me that redemption is possible, even for someone like me. A gentle breeze rustled through the cemetery trees, and Matthew felt a deep peace settle over him. The power he now carried, the power of forgiveness, integrity, and authentic service, was infinitely more valuable than anything he had stolen from the dead. As he walked away from the cemetery that evening, Matthew Kaunda was no longer a man haunted by his past, but a man grateful for his second chance. The secret that had once made him famous had been exposed, judged, and forgiven. In losing everything he thought mattered, he had found everything that actually did. The story of Pastor Matthew Kaunda had ended, but the story of Matthew the teacher, Matthew the servant, Matthew the redeemed, that story was just beginning. The end of the story Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to this channel for more content like this. Make sure you drop your comment and share your thoughts with us.